This is the Tech Phantom, and welcome to video number 21 of this Secrets and Lore walkthrough. And this is going to be a continuation of episodes 8 and 9. We had to break the continuity of the walkthrough because the game forces us to defeat Small and Ornstein, obtain the Lore Vessel, and then it makes the way forward available. And we also needed to advance the build a little bit in order to be able to have a strong enough character so that it wasn't super challenging and we weren't going to die quite a bit advancing past the catacombs. But what I would recommend, guys, is that you watch episode 9 and then you watch this episode, episode 21, back to back if you want a more fluid or a more continuous type of a walkthrough, because I am going to be building on the things that I started discussing back on episode 9. Alright, so what we are going to be doing today is we are going to finish out the catacombs and we are going to take on Lord Nito. And if you remember, Lord Nito was one of the original lords that found Lord Soul. And he is a little different from the other lords. He is sort of out on his own. It may be that it's because he is the first of the undead that he doesn't really partner up with Gwynn or stay with Gwynn or worship Gwynn like the other lords do after Gwynn defeats the dragons. For whatever reason, he did help Gwynn when Gwynn fought the dragons. You remember the Witch of Isolith and Seath and Lord Nito all helped out Lord Gwynn to defeat the dragons. But it's not very clear why he did it, and there's a lot of speculation on other walkthroughs, and when you look at lore videos, some people say that it has to do with the fact that the dragons are immortal, and Nito being the first of the undead resents that, so he wants to kill them, and he wants to take away sort of their immortality, which is I guess he views the dragons as sort of an affront to his nature because he is the first of the undead. I really don't have a good reason as to why Nito decided to fight the dragons. I'm trying to piece something together. The closest thing that I can think of is that Nito being the first of the undead is somehow tied to humans or has a little bit of an appreciation for humans and humanity, and that he feels that the dragons maybe are holding back humans, or it could be that Nito is jealous of the dragons because humanity does worship the dragons, and he wants humanity, humans, to worship not the dragons, but to worship him, or to worship some of the other gods. So, but this is a little bit of a hole actually in this walkthrough where I'm not really going to have a good reason. At least I haven't found a good reason as of now, and I've recorded a couple of more videos, and I still haven't found a good reason or read a reason that is compelling enough for me to believe it. So I'm really looking forward to your comments, and I'm open to hearing about your ideas as to why it is that Nito decided to partner up with Gwynn and help him with the fight of the dragons, because he seems to be completely aloof and completely separate from the other gods. But there is an interesting plot line that we will explore in the latter part of the video that might give us a hint, but like I said, I haven't been able to piece it together. Alright, so one thing that I did do is I switched to hovels, and then I switch back. I'm going to be wearing hovels armor, and the reason I'm going to be doing that is because I don't want to die, and we are going to come through a part where there's quite a bit of strong characters, and actually the build that we have right now is strong enough to take on the enemies. But just to make the video a little bit more um, uninterrupted, I guess. I'm going to be wearing Hovel set, and I'm going to be wearing the Ring of Steel Protection to give me just a little bit more defense, and to make sure that I give myself as good of a chance as possible to not die. Since that, like I said, that kills the continuity of the video. Alright, so, but I did make a mistake that is going to cost me, guys, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's going to give me the opportunity to show you that there's a couple of different ways to get a pretty challenging item. And we are coming up to it. But first we need to get through these giant skeletons. And they are past the Pinwheel Boss area. And if you remember, the necromancers and Pinwheel actually made skeletons, and the skeletons were controlled by his necromancers. But the giant skeletons, I don't think were made by Pinwheel. I think those actually were made by Lord Nito, and he has set them up as guards to control the entrance to his realm, the entrance to his kingdom. And I think that the giant skeletons are too big, too powerful, a type of creature to be made by Pinwheel. And they don't seem to be controlled or by the necromancers, and there are no necromancers past the Pinwheel Boss area. So I think that the giant skeletons are actually controlled by Nito. Alright, so we are trying to get the large divine ember, and big spoiler here, I am going to die, but it's possible to get it using this method that I'm showing you here. The mistake that I made is I took off the Ring of Steel Protection, and I didn't put it back on, and that's going to cost me because I take a hit at the very end where I die. So I will be back in a jiffy here with my after I recover my souls. Alright, so we are back, and instead of using the hit and run method that we tried to use before, we are actually going to go into hand-to-hand melee combat with the giant skeletons. And I wanted to show you guys that this particular build has just an obscene amount of damage output. And if you put on a heavy set like Hobbles, you can be a very, very strong tank build. But you really don't need to have the heavy armor. If you want to maintain the fast roll, you can have a lighter set. But you're just able to do so much damage, an unbelievable amount of damage. So I wanted to show you guys that it is possible to come in here and just do hand-to-hand combat with the giant skeletons. Alright, so we have found the large divine ember, and the description of this ember is pretty interesting. It tells us that, first of all, it's an ember used in secret church rites, and it also tells us that it was meant for divine blacksmiths. So on a previous video we found the standard or the normal divine ember, and that was located on the body of a divine blacksmith, and he was actually a god blacksmith. He was the blacksmith that made the weapons for the gods. And we put forth the theory that Seath had a hand in that he killed the blacksmith because the blacksmith was friendly with Habel and may set him free, and Seath wanted to avoid this, killed him, and put a moonlight butterfly outside to sort of guard the way. And you guys can go and review that part of of the lore on the video where I killed the moonlight butterfly. if you're more curious. So let's talk about why we would find a divine ember here. Well, there's two reasons. Reason number one is that the church hid it here. Reason number two is that it's not the church that hid it here, but it's actually Nito that took possession of the large divine ember for some reason. Maybe there was a power grab after Gwynn left to link the fires, and Lord Nito took advantage of this vacuum of power, sort of, and he decided to grab the divine ember. And he's keeping it here, and he's got it protected by the giant skeletons, and the giant skeletons are Nito's creation. Now, why would the church want to put it here? Well, obviously they would want to keep it away from humans, because the large divine ember allows the manufacture of weapons that are on par with divine weapons of the gods, and it would be blasphemous for humans to have the same ability, the same weapons as the gods. Then humans would no longer be in awe of the gods, and they could lose their faith, and that would be an attack that would be detrimental to the power of the church, so they would want to do that. Now, I don't think that the church put the ember here. I actually think that Nito got a hold of it, or maybe that Nito was given the ember at some point by Gwynn, but I don't think that the church gave him the ember. And I'll talk about why as we progress through this video. Alright, so another thing I didn't talk about at the beginning of the video was the holy set, and we found that right at the beginning of the video, and if you read the description of that item, which I didn't talk about at all, it said that is the armor that clerics who are on pilgrimages wear. And the pilgrimages are for self-purification. And clerics that are dissatisfied with church teachings, clerics that don't quite believe in what the way of the white church is trying to teach, before their faith is completely lost, they are sent into these pilgrimages to try to re-inculcate them into the faith, or re-strengthen their faith, just to bring them back into the church. And that just shows you how powerful the church is, that they can force the undead members of its church, or that they can force those that are dissatisfied or that are doubting of the teachings. All of those folks are forced to go on a pilgrimage. So this is a very, very, very strong church. So there are many reasons. There's a couple of reasons why the Way of the White sends clerics into this area, into the catacombs. We've talked about them in some previous videos. The clerics are here to hunt the undead, and they're also here to look for the rite of kindling. But there's another reason, and the effigy shield, which is one of the most important, from a lore standpoint, is one of the most important items in the game. The effigy shield is going to tell us a little bit different story. So this frightful occult shield defends against divine weapons and lightning. Now, what's interesting about the shield is, if you look at the actual stats for the shield, it has very good fire and very, very good lightning defense, but it doesn't have good magical defense. It also doesn't have very good physical defense. So I guess the lightning defense and the fire defense makes sense, because if you are going up against Gwynn, and you have to remember, if you are a member, if you're a follower of the occult, if you are basically a non-believer or someone that was dissatisfied with church teachings, and even after being sent into a pilgrimage, their dissatisfaction grew and they just completely lost faith, and they have a different kind of faith. Their faith basically turned into an occult type of faith. So that's why they're called the followers of the occult. Anyway, what I think happened was that those followers, as they were being sent down into the catacombs, um, in this pilgrimages that was supposed to help them reestablish their faith, what ended up happening is that they met here and they started talking, and they actually, the opposite happened. Their animosity and their hate for the church and their dissatisfaction actually grew to the point where there was enough of them that they actually decided to rebel against the church. Now we know that the Way of the White Church was started by Old Father Lloyd, who was an uncle of Lord Gwynn, and the whole point of the church is to treat Lord Gwynn as as a deity, and to help Lord Gwynn with his purpose, which is to kindle the fire and to maintain the flame. And that is why there are pilgrimages to the catacombs. That is why the clerics are sent to hunt the undead, because their bones are used in the bonfires to maintain the flame, and why they also look for the rite of kindling, because the rite of kindling allows flames to burn brighter and to burn longer. And remember that the bonfires are not just a standard typical fire. The bonfires are linked together, and they're related to wind somehow, and they maintain the darkness away. Um, they help the gods maintain their power and their strength. So the third reason for clerics coming down here is to find the effigy shield, because the church would want to find it and would want to destroy it. But we have found it, and I think that the reason why the effigy shield is so weak, why it doesn't have very good magic defense, you would think that it would have good magic defense because Lord Gwyn can wield some very powerful miracles, and magic defense would be helpful with that. But I think that the reason that it doesn't have very good physical defense and it doesn't have good magical defense is because the rebellion happened such a long time ago that the shield has been drained of its power. Either that, or the church was able to find the members of this occult rebellion, and they were able to stop them before they were able to finish their work on the effigy shield, before the effigy shield was completed. And maybe the effigy shield, when it was completed, would have had very high magic defense, and it would also have very high physical defense. It would have been a lethal weapon against anybody that was against Lord Gwyn and against the other gods. All right, so continuing on here, we just fought a couple of minutes ago. Leroy, he's a paladin, and he was the first undead in the Church of the White. In the Church of the Way of the White, and he was the first one that undertook a pilgrimage, and apparently he was a very high ranking bishop, because the faith required for his weapon, not only do you have to be extremely strong, but you also have to have an extremely high amount of faith. So he was a very high ranking member of the Church of the White. Alright, so we are fighting here more pinwheel bosses as we're getting ready to get into the Nito fight. And the baby skeletons show us where the giant skeletons come from. So the baby skeletons are created by Nito using humanity and using that clay at that bottom of the floor, and the baby skeletons are actually tended by the pinwheels, and using humanity they eventually grow into the giant skeletons, and that is why the baby skeletons drop humanity. It's because their humanity gets sort of spent as they grow and they're turned into giant skeletons, but they need humanity to begin with in order to allow them to grow. So anyway, that's my theory on where the the giant skeletons come from, and the tie between the giant skeletons and the baby skeletons. All right, so we're getting ready to take on to the fight with Lord Nito, and again, this boss fight is going to show you just how strong the character is by now. We are very powerful, and we are even going to go into the fight being toxic because we got hit by that Grave Lord um, miracle that Nito has. And what you need to do is when you hear the high-pitched scream, you need to dodge. That's your indication that the swords are about to jut out of the ground. But I didn't do that, and as you can see, I'm toxic, and I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm strong enough that I didn't want to deal with trying to find a moss, and I don't have the remedy spell equipped, but those you can actually use those obviously if you're worried about having toxic status during the fight. But we are so strong and we can do so much damage, and with Hobble Shield we're able to tank quite a bit of damage, and the skeletons are not posing a lot of damage to us, so we were able to take care of Nito pretty quickly. Now, I missed a couple of things that I wanted to mention. One is that the effigy shield, another interesting item on the effigy shield. The definition of effigy is a likeness, typically of a hated group. Well, if you take a look, a close-up of the effigy shield, it's going to show you this face that looks like a demon or a dragon. It's got horns, it's got what appears to be scales, it's got large bulbous eyes, and it has giant teeth. So to me it doesn't, it's not the personification of Lord Gwynn, which you would think the effigy shield would have a personification, either Lord Gwynn or Old Father Lloyd, or maybe one of the bishops. But maybe the reason the shield looks like that, it's because the members of the occult are trying to highlight that the church is evil, and that's why there is a picture of that demon on the shield. But it's you would think that the effigy shield, which is supposed to be a personification of the evil things in the church, would look more like Lord Gwynn or more like a bishop, but it doesn't. It looks like a demon to me. Now, the other thing that I didn't talk about, which was pretty interesting too, guys, is the covetous silver serpent ring, which we picked up a while ago. And again, that description of the ring tells us that it's a symbol of a serpent, and serpents are imperfect dragons. So it's possible that both covetous rings were actually made by the primordial serpents, and because of their imperfect nature, because of their greed, they either use the rings themselves to get more souls or to get more items, or they tempt humans with those rings. We know that they tempted the four kings and the dark wraiths with the power of life dream. So maybe they're using the rings to tempt humanity as well. But I wanted to mention that very briefly before I finished it. And now that the fight is over, we're going to go back to Firelink Shrine, and we'll continue talking about the lore. Alright, so we are back in Firelink Shrine after having disposed of Lord Nito, and we now are going to have the opportunity to interact with a new NPC. But before we do that, let's talk to Laurentius, and I wanted to do this before we end this walkthrough, and we're getting close to the end. We only have a few videos left, but he sells Iron Flesh, and he also sells Flash Sweat. And just like Power Within, those two spells or pyromancies were made by Carmina, and she was a very talented pyromancer, and she took pyromancy in a different direction. She actually used the humanity that is within the pyromancer himself or herself, and used it to to create some kind of a useful spell. So flash sweat makes you sweat profusely, covers you in water that protects you from fire. Iron Flesh takes your humanity and turns you into a rock of infinite poise. You can move around very quickly, but you essentially are the ultimate tank, and that is a useful spell if you want to tank damage on some mini bosses or even on some boss fights. And of course, Power Within, which I've used quite a bit. You guys have seen me use Power Within to augment the amount of damage output that I have, and that is a very, very useful spell. Alright, but we finally have the opportunity to chat up Patches the Hyena, who is the most unlikable NPC in the history of games. I'm trying to think, not just Dark Souls, but I'm trying to think of any other video games where I've come across a more unlikable NPC, and not just in Demon Souls, but in Dark Souls, but in Demon Souls as well. And the first thing that Patches is going to start talking about is he's going to badmouth all of the NPCs that you've met up to this point. He's going to badmouth Lautrec, Petrus, he even badmouths Solaire, and he talks about the fact that Solaire is a pretty strong guy, but maybe he's not the brightest bulb, because you can just nod your head and fake as if you're listening to Solaire, and he'll leave you alone. So Patches is a manipulator of the worst kind, and he sells some interesting items. He sells some items that the clerics would have. He also sells the masks that the Pinwheel Boss would have down in the Catacombs. So what this guy is doing is he has looted all of these items from the clerics and other bodies down in the Catacombs, and now that he's got enough, he's come up to the surface, and he's going to start selling them because Lord Nito is dead. So he's not. Maybe the clerics are not going to be going down for pilgrimages as much. So he's come up to the surface, and now that he's got all this loot, he doesn't know what to do with it, and he's gonna pose as an honest merchant, and he's gonna try to sell you all of these items that he looted off of corpses that he killed himself, or that he trapped, or that he helped others trap, or that fell to the skeletons or fell to the Pinwheel Boss. So this guy's really a heel, really an unlikable NPC. And but I've waited a long time to do this, but it is time to make Patches the Hyena pay. And the reason why the church is so worried about Dark Hand is because of the life drain ability of Dark Hand, and the Dark Wraiths incited by Cath use this item, and they could suck the humanity out of clerics, out of divine folks. And this is what it looks like when you use Dark Hand on an NPC. So we are going to suck all the humanity out of Patches because he deserves it. And so while I do that, because it's going to take me a couple of minutes to get through all of his humanity, I'm going to do a little bit of a recap of what we've done in this video. So we've gone into the Catacombs, we have killed Lord Nito, and we have found that the Way of the White Church is sending clerics down into the Catacombs for 3 reasons. They need bones of the undead in order to keep the fires going. So the clerics that are dissatisfied are sent on this pilgrimage to hunt the undead. The other reason is to look for the Rite of Kindling. The church is looking for the Rite of Kindling. The Rite of Kindling is going to allow the church to make the fires last longer and to last brighter. And the Rite of Kindling is owned by the Pinwheel Boss, so the church is sending the clerics down to get it. And the third and last reason, and I think the most important reason, is that the Church of the Way of the White uses the pilgrimages as a way to control non-believers and dissatisfied clerics. And what happens, there are two outcomes when an undead cleric goes on a pilgrimage. They can either be successful and find the items that are very important to the church and they can regain their faith, or they could perish. So either way, the church wins because they either get important items that they need, or they get believers back into their fold, or they get rid of non-believers. So this is a pretty intricate thing that they put in play to control the undead. Now let's talk a little bit about Patches. And now that we've taken all his humanity, and I'm pretty sure that Patches himself was one of those dissatisfied clerics. And I say that because he drops the crescent axe. He fights with the spear, but he drops the crescent axe. So I think he was one of those dissatisfied non-believers that was sent into the was sent on a pilgrimage. And in order to wield the crescent axe, you need 16 faith. So you have to have a little bit of faith. So that's why I think that he was a cleric at some point. But when he came on his pilgrimage, he completely lost his faith and he completely turned on the church. And that explains his hatred for clerics. That's why he's always asking other travelers, "Are you a cleric?" And if you are, boy, he's really got it in for them. And anyway, he just lost his way and he became this nasty person that is going to try to kill and murder and pillage anyone that he gets on his way, but especially if they happen to be from the Church of the Way of the White, because he was one of those that were dissatisfied with the teachings. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is the Tech Phantom signing off.